Many of you are likely well aware that Marvel's Avengers has been making headlines recently because of some illogical decisions that they made. This is a game that's already hemorrhaging players because of its lack of content, substance, variety, and technical polish. And now, existing players are pretty pissed about their future plans for the game. The mistake that they're making is reducing the pacing at which you level up Marvel's Avengers characters, making an already grindy game grindier for no real good reason, really. They're fixing a problem that doesn't exist. This is all detailed in Marvel's Avengers official website. This blog post relays how the developers believe that the game has pacing issues, such as skill points currently being rewarded too fast, which may be confusing and overwhelming to newer players. We want each decision to invest in a skill or heroic to be more meaningful. I don't know anyone who's ever complained about leveling too fast in Marvel's Avengers. If anything, a lot of people would love to level up even faster, because the big appeal of Marvel's Avengers right now, the only real good thing going for it is that the combat actually does get pretty interesting once you level up a character enough. Once you max out a character and get all of their movesets and skills, that's when combat really shines. So players actually want to get there faster. But where is Marvel's Avengers going? The opposite direction, because they believe it's going to be confusing and overwhelming. I've never once found that to be the case. And this right here, wanting to make each expenditure of a skill point to be more meaningful, that to me sounds straight up like their version of sense of pride and accomplishment, which is the excuse EA used to make the process of unlocking Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader extremely grindy. They said, hey, the longer it takes to finish that marathon, the more accomplished you'll feel when you get to the finish line. But that relies on the marathon itself actually being good, and the Marvel's Avengers marathon is just tedious, generic, boring, repetitive. And so the last thing this game needs right now is to make the grind worse. What it needs is more content, more missions, more variety, more activities with compelling objectives. They're taking the one thing that people do enjoy about this game, fully fleshing out the combat mechanics and systems of the various characters within this game, and making it harder to get to that point. Illogical, completely illogical. Well, a developer did try to explain further in a post that they released on various social media and forum platforms. So here's that statement on Reddit. And you can see from the number of upvotes here, 0, how well this is going down. The reason this is at 0 is because there are more downvotes than upvotes, and you can really see that right here. 28% of people, only 28%, upvoted this post, as many found this explanation to be unsatisfactory. So let me read this and comment along the way. We wanted to offer more clarification and details on the recently announced XP change. We did not change XP to increase grind for grind's sake. Our initial blog was not comprehensive enough to convey what we were doing and why, so we caused confusion. We get it. So, what are we doing and why? Currently, as you get to higher levels, the XP required between levels didn't scale well, but your ability to crush enemies certainly does speed up at higher levels, so you could end up leveling up, dinging 2 to 3 times per mission, with missions taking about 10 to 20 minutes in length. So what's the problem? This is great, you might say. The problem we were seeing and hearing was that you would immediately get more skill points than you had time to review, apply, and get used to before embarking on your next mission and gaining your next few levels. Hopefully you can see the issue here. No, I in fact cannot. If anything, getting multiple skill points per mission, that would make the experience more rewarding. And look, I'm not saying that pacing of leveling in terms of skill unlocks isn't important, but when you've got something like Marvel's Avengers that has such insubstantial, generic, and substanceless content, the combat really has to shine, and it only shines when you get to the tail end of a character's leveling spectrum. So for you to nerf that is the worst possible thing you can do for this game at this juncture. Not to mention that, again, I've never heard the complaint that the rate at which you earn new moves and skills is overwhelming. And even if there are players who feel overwhelmed, there are ways that they can choose their own pacing. They can decide not to spend skill points until they learn the existing moveset that they currently have, and then they can kind of go at their own pace, or they can unlock this different skills and just kind of adapt as they go along. And if they forget to use certain skills because they're still getting acclimated to it, then they can check their skill tree to recall moves that they might have forgotten to use and get reacclimated with that and find an active way to use them during missions and activities. You know, it's just one of those non-issues. The statement continues, we want people to level up. In fact, we really want to see more people level up, more heroes, as playing the full Avenger roster should be the most fun thing you can do. But we don't want the leveling up experience to be too overwhelming or diminish exploring each skill purchase. It really does sound like they're just underestimating the intelligence of players. 2 to 3 skill points spent isn't going to be such a drastic change that players will feel like they're playing a completely different character. They're still going to have the existing moveset that they're used to, but slowly they can get used to using those additional things that they have unlocked and learn the character that way, and that can become its own fulfilling element of the game. But beyond that, because Marvel's Avengers is a game that's lacking so much variety, especially where mission design and objectives are concerned, the rate at which you obtain those skills actually makes up for that a little bit. Every new mission, at least, you've got new combat maneuvers that you can experiment with, and so combat feels a little more evolved with every mission you play up until the character gets to level 50 and is maxed out. And from that point onwards, the end game should be carried by compelling loot, compelling rewards, and compelling activities, and that's what this game is missing. And this feels like a way to compensate for that. Because the content isn't there, they're taking the interesting combat mechanic and making that part of the grind. The statement continues, so we smoothed out the higher level curves to make it so you were less likely to ding more than once or twice per mission at the higher end. There's so much variability in how quick you can gain XP, level types, mission selection, etc. But the end result of our tuning was meant to add around 3 to 5 hours to reach the maximum level in total. This means leveling at a steadier pace around every 2 to 4 missions at the upper end. And I believe they mean per character. So you multiply 3 to 5 hours by the number of characters that are currently available in Marvel's Avengers, with more coming down the line like Hawkeye on March 18th. And we're looking at dozens of extra hours that you have to grind in this game. And maybe that'd be okay if the missions were compelling, if the objectives were well realized, if the game was actually fun to play beyond the combat mechanics. But because that's lacking, you know, adding extra grind, adding dozens of hours of repetition, it's just gonna make people grow that much more tired of this game. Moving on, we consider this a way to achieve clearer ding thresholds and more time to engage with and enjoy each skill purchase. We also tuned the game to make early leveling slightly faster, giving players more advantage against enemies when first starting out and hopefully making them feel more like a superhero faster. So here's a major contradiction. They just got done saying that the reason they're slowing down leveling is because it might get too overwhelming and confusing if players are earning skill points too fast. And now here we have a portion of the statement saying that you're actually going to level up slightly faster in the early game, which defeats the whole purpose of what they claim they're trying to do. If anything, in the earlier levels, that's when players are less acclimated with characters. That's when it might get more overwhelming and confusing. So it just feels like they can't really get their story straight. The statement concludes with, lastly, more powerful enemies will grant additional XP, which makes them more rewarding to take down. Hopefully this clears things up and offers a better version of what we're doing with the XP change, and will work better to make things clearer when we share this sort of information. No, this doesn't clear things up at all. It just makes things that much more confusing. And scrolling down here and looking at the responses, you'll find plenty of people who are equally confused. So here's one of the top comments that reads, "This doesn't make any sense at all. The reason people were calling the game a brain-dead button masher at first was because the depth of the combat is locked to the very late stages of each character's skill tree, and after the campaign you were at like level 5 to 10 with each character. Why make it take longer to get to that depth, so that more potential new players can come to the same ignorant conclusion as time goes on? Investing a bunch of skill points at once felt great because depending on whether you made the right decisions, your character would feel wildly different next mission, and if you really liked where it was going, it encouraged you to see it through until 50. This is just a dumb change, no matter what." I said this in my last video, by the time I finished the game's content, the campaign, and did some of the endgame stuff, the energy to play the game had run out before combat's full potential had been unlocked. That's a major imbalance. Here's another Reddit user who put it very simply and 100% accurately: "This is a terrible move. Leveling up was never the issue. The lack of content was." And there's actually a Reddit user here who echoed my sentiments about how this all feels like their version of providing players with a sense of pride and accomplishment. But to actually get a sense of pride and accomplishment, the journey has to be as compelling as the destination, and that's the major issue with Marvel's Avengers. The journey is so boring. The vehicle of that journey, the combat system, is kind of cool, and that's about it. The journey's just so bad, and the destination isn't fantastic either. Because by the time you do level up all your characters to level 50, you'll have run out of content to play, to utilize the fully realized combat mechanics in. Here's one more for good measure: what you're doing is counterproductive. I wanted to give this game another shot and level both Kate and Clint after the 18th. What you did is tell me that the slog of playing characters who have not unlocked their whole skill set will be longer, and I barely finished the grind on the previous ones. And then here's a quote from the statement about how the devs want players to engage with and enjoy each skill purchase more. To which this user responded, "Nobody cares about ding thresholds. We want to play fully enabled superheroes." Or to put it another way, people stuck with Destiny and Destiny 2 because the gameplay is great. You're stopping people from easily accessing the best parts of your gameplay. First thing you want with a live service is to make sure all of the mechanics are clear relatively early on so that the end game can be focused on looting, on grinding for compelling new gear or compelling new items, cosmetics, whatever it is, compelling rewards, and developing characters further through builds that add new dynamics to the existing mechanics. That's what should keep this game going. They're making a game out of the combat rather than making a game out of the content because the content is non-existent. With all said and done, I just don't buy this statement that they didn't implement this additional grind just for the sake of grind, because not only are they contradicting themselves by making the early levels faster, to me, the timing of it all, with this update coming out on March 18th, the same time as the next-gen versions of Marvel's Avengers and the release of the Hawkeye DLC, tells me that the Hawkeye DLC in particular doesn't actually have a whole lot of content, and so to keep players engaged for longer, they're just taking the DLC content and stretching it very, very thin. And what better way to do that than slowing down how quickly you can get the new character Hawkeye from level 1 to level 50. Existing players are now going to play a worse version of Marvel's Avengers that's just going to be even grindier. And newcomers are straight up not getting a better version of this game months after launch. They're getting an inferior experience as well. This is just a lose-lose situation as far as I'm concerned. But that's just one man's take on everything. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the response that Marvel's Avengers developers provided to the backlash surrounding this XP rework. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.